Hello, Assalamu alaikum again. Samiana Kiram. I hope you can hear me better now. Okay, all right. So it's indeed a pleasure to meet you all on such a wonderful topic. Bafiki Study Circle is always very nostalgic for us. We have been privileged to associate with various Bafiki study circles working across central universities in India at various capacities. Oh, sorry, Allama Iqbal Center. It's not Bafaki, okay. Allama Iqbal Center. Right. It doesn't make, you know, much difference indeed. I'm happy to know that you have a Allama Iqbal Center as well in Jamia under MSF committee. Previously, we used to have Bafaki study circles in almost every universities in Delhi and Hyderabad, and most of the central universities now. Actually, as far as I can remember, it started from JNU, somewhere around 2008, 9, that time, and it spread across the central university campuses. It was before the unit committees of MSF was formed in most of the central universities. And even after MSF got stronger in all these campuses, the studies circles continued with more of a intellectual, exercises and exchanges between the students of like-minded, ideological lineages. So it's interesting that you are still continuing with such a wonderful, vibrant intellectual discourses and debates that actually keeps our politics going, in a very positive way. So, of course, we are discussing about, as the topic is very promising, since it is a South Asian context, we can make some of the conclusions. Because we already have this kind of Gen Z revolutions already happening, already happened in more than 3 countries in our neighborhood. Of course, it started with Sri Lanka 2022, and we had a similar kind of an exercise or similar kind of an experience, political turbulence we witnessed in Nepal that is quite radical in nature. And of course, we had seen some kind of a very radical grassroots student oriented real revolution happening in Bangladesh as well. So it makes some sense to make a kind of a contours or maybe a trajectory or making a trend analysis what is happening across the South Asian states. It's almost like a ripple effect. In political science, in defense studies, we have a theory which defines the military coups. It believes that military coups has a ripple effect. Once in a region, one country falls for a military coup by toppling a democratic government, it is very likely that the same coup is going to spread across the borders within the region. And there are some very empirical studies which actually justifies these findings. West Africa is one of the best examples for justifying or ratifying these theories findings. Likewise, now we are in a position to theorize something, what is happening to the Gen Zs, the new generations, fighting for the political reform in this region. Of course, the reasons for revolution is quite different in all these countries. And that is not exactly the reasons. The trigger points are actually different. The reasons are somehow, quite similar. You can say that it's similar in the sense some of the things which is quite obvious in the semi-functional democracies like us, like most of the countries in South Asia, the people's resentment and their disenchantment with the system is quite strong these days. And that is not a peculiar South Asian trait. Indeed, it is actually something happening all across the world. But the intensity of the disenchantment is much, much larger in, in, in South Asian democratic states. Because our experience with democracy has always been uh, on an experimental note. It's never been a finished business. It's still in transition. It is still in progress, kind of a situation. So people's expectations are not matching with the delivery of the government or the system. That is the ultimate underlying cause for all these revolutions we see. And it's not only Gen Z revolutions. Every revolution in this world happened on the same uh, pretext or preconditions. So nothing surprising about that. That is my first point. But that is not the case. What we are going to discuss here is, you know that the major reasons for Sri Lankan transition and the revolution, it is mainly because of the economic conditions. The country was under IMF bailout for a long time, and the austerity measures and the profligacy, economic profligacy by the government was unbearable when the people were suffering for the very essential needs, and the price rise, inflation, and all those things were happening. At the same time, the ruling class, the ruling elite was enjoying uh, with uh, with unbearable, level of audacity. That, of course, and the ground was quite uh, fertile for any kind of a kind of a very violent political revolution, because people were people's, you know, the the threshold for receiving the failure of a government differs from society to society. Maybe a revolution of Sri Lankan kind may not be happening in India in very soon, because the threshold for Indian society for accepting uh, the failure or a dysfunctional government is quite high, because of our, various social and economic conditions and historical reasons. That includes the feudal characteristics of our society, the class and the caste hierarchy, which is deeply enrooted into the social fabrics of this country. So people have a larger bearing capacity, you know. But Sri Lankan case, it was all about the austerity and all those. Of course, I mean, the most important point is the Sri Lankan government and the Rajapaksa family, the kind of political power consolidation, not only political power, even the economic resources, most of the resources, mining contracts, big business firms, everything was under the control of one single family with, with, a lot of nepotism. That means that the, 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 the nepotism was, in Nepal's case and Sri Lankan case, uh, the nepotism within the political system was too much. And one or two families, or a couple of families, I mean, it's a complete oligarchy between the state, the political class, the political elite, the ruling elite, bureaucrats, military generals, and the business class. It's, of course, that what it results is nothing but crony capitalism. So Sri Lanka was an imminent case. And Sri Lanka was quite radical in that form, Even when it was happening, all of us were expecting that the revolutionaries would accept the Ranil Wickremesinghe, a very respected politician inside and outside Sri Lanka, that his mediation um, measures will be taken or will be accepted by the revolutionaries. But they rejected that as well. They want a fundamental radical change, and they succeeded in it. What happens after the revolution, which is next point we will discuss. Likewise, Nepal's case, O.P. Sharma Oli's government, the Nepalese uh, political trajectory or the political transformation is quite turbulent for a long time now. It's been 20 years from a monarchy to a constitution, right? In that constitution, a very radical left constitutional democracy, although it sounds little oxymoron, but that was precisely happened. But within 10 years, the promises of revolutions were crumbled down one by one. You know, all those revolutionaries of 2010, including Sharma Oli, Prachanda, all of them, in a less than a decade, all of them turned into a very seasoned political figures, and the people were really disenchanted. The most important cases in Sri Lanka, the real Gen Z kind of a revolution happened in Sri Lanka. In fact, the major trigger, the root causes, as I told you, root causes remain the same. But one of the peculiar characteristics of in what happened in Sri Lanka is the political nepotism. Second, of course, the government was quite insensitive to the needs of the people, particularly the younger generation. They banned social media for many days. That became the trigger. And finally, a very popular and a successful rapper, Balender Shah, toppled the government and formed a new government. What happened after the revolution? It's something very it's like very interesting to discuss, but we will discuss. Bangladesh is the same way. Bangladesh is also, it's all because of the high-handedness of the the former regime, Sheikh Hasina. She was quite adamant, and she was killed almost. I mean, she was literally killed or made them completely, the whole opposition made completely dysfunctional. She has sabotaged almost every democratic institutions. And finally, the trigger point was, introducing that quota system for war veterans, 1971 war, introduction of a job reservation for the son, the descendants of war veterans. That actually annoyed, irritated, and agitated, provoked the younger generation. That was the triggering point. But the underlying root causes are quite similar. Demographic pressure. That is the biggest challenge uh, in South Asia now. Most of the countries in South Asia, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, all of them have a youth bulge. Their young population is almost on 65% and above. And you don't have any opportunities in your government sector or private sector. Your economies are stagnated, and there is no much growth. Even the growth, even your economy is growing without the employment, and the growth without employment is the biggest problem India has been facing, like the neighbors since 1991. We have been growing in GDP terms, we have been growing in our economic terms, in our size of our economy, GDP, everything is growing. But the problem is that we don't have enough employment generation happening. And you have an enormous million size youth, educated, skilled, semi-skilled, degree holders, postgraduate holders, but you don't have anything to offer for them. At the same time, like the case in Sri Lanka and in Sri Lanka particularly, the political class is enjoying the power, and they have a unbearable nepotism only because of all their sons and daughters are studying abroad, now having a very stable life. All of them are placed in government or in private sector. When the common man, this common man is not the poor. That is the thing. It's middle class. educated, urban, you know, otherwise enjoying a kind of a semi-privileged life. They're not poor, downtrodden, marginalized. They're the mainstream, in fact. But they have no opportunities. And this is, I mean, this created a kind of a complete disenchantment within the generations. It's not a rocket science, everybody can understand that. It's a challenge, this democratic pressure. And most of these cases, except to a large extent, except India, political dysfunction was another problem. The government has become a group of thugs, a group of, a kind of a kleptocracy, a small group of elites who are controlling everything of the life, not only the politics, economy, you know, the other power centers, institutions. Everything is controlled by a small group of people. And that's okay. It always happens in that way. But the large majority of the people are actually under distress. And that is mainly because of the political dysfunction or the institutional failure of the government. Right. Now, of course, that will create a very huge resentment against the ruling elite. You know, of course, if you have nepotism, you have a crony capitalist economy, you have an oligarchic or a kleptocratic style of functioning. Corruption is, of course, corruption, nepotism, and autocratic tendencies are inevitable in such a country, in a political system. All those things are hand in hand. It goes together. So that was the reason for all these things in many of these things, many of these countries. Uh, the the revolution in Sri Lanka, I mean, of course, I mean, they formed a government, quite a revolutionary government, a left-leaning government. Even the left in India was celebrating that finally a red revolution or a left revolution finally, embarked on Sri Lankan soil, although it was quite romanticized, you know, a glorified story. But the new ruling class showed and strongly believed in social welfare, democratic structure. Uh, but revolution and the governance is always something very mismatching in throughout the history. You come, you you won a you win a revolution with a lot of promises. People's expectations are at the peak, but when it comes to the governance, delivery is the problem, because most of the problems you have in your country is not essentially resolved or can be resolved by your internal factors. You have many external factors which is completely out of your control. Take the cases of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. All of them, all these countries were under IMF bailout for more than 5 years, less than, more than 5 years, more than almost a decade for Sri Lanka. So they have all these problems of sovereign debt crisis, inflation, hyperinflation in case of Sri Lanka, you know, and commodity shortages in Nepal, all those things. Now, okay, people have believed your rhetoric, people believed in your ideology, people believed in your, agenda for transformation. You came to the power. Now it's time to deliver. Political honeymoons does not last more than 6 months. People starts expecting real things happening on the ground. As of today, many of the most all these three countries are actually struggling to deliver. Sri Lanka is really coping up, but it's still a problem. They are not very uh, not on the foot. They're still struggling with managing things, mainly because of the financial crisis and the austerity measures introduced by the government is not very much in favor of the people. People does not like it. They know that the economic profligacy was the reason for all this hyperinflation, corruption, and all those things, and their economy in crumbles. And the only thing you can do in such a situation is, introducing austerity measures, uh, reducing the government spending, public sector spending, and all those things. But that creates more problem with the people. When government start their own austerity measures and stop or reducing the spending on the public sector, public will not like it, isn't it? You don't have enough medicines in your public hospitals. You don't have new teachers appointed in your public schools. You don't have any infrastructural development activities happening in your country. People will not like it, and that is a problem. Sri Lanka is facing. Likewise, you know, in Nepal, it was always about the scandal, corruption, all those things. And Balansha promised on a corruption-free governance and all those things. But within a year, less than a year, as far as I can remember, at least two ministers have already resigned on the scandal and the scam charges, corruption charges. Bangladesh is also the revolution happened on a very radical phase, a complete transformation. But the new government is very reluctant, still very reluctant to introduce the radical transformations in the system. People are getting really kind of disappointed. They have already started. Those who are following the social media, particularly Twitter, X, in Bangladesh, you can see that most of those handles which we used to follow during the revolution, or many of them are either inactive or disenchanted, or started expressing their disappointments. So South Asian new revolutions are actually on a turning point. This is the background for we discuss the Indian Gen Z revolution, which happened a couple of weeks back. It was very interesting that of course it is very optimistic. I am very hopeful, like all of us, most of the people. I hope, it's mainly because of some of the very radical, some of the very, basic fundamental beliefs we have. That one is that the transition to democracy in Indian society is still a work in progress process. So any activity or any movement which will help to democratize Indian society is welcome. If not today, it will pay off in the future. So in that way, anything which democratize people who speak about social justice and things like that, it's always welcome in India. On that note, I'm very optimistic about that. And finally, after a long, style of governance and political structure, it's a new wave. It's completely different. It's completely different. It is refreshing to see that that youngsters. Of course, it's not something very new that Indian youngsters are very first time coming out. No, it's not like that. We have been seeing it at least for last 15 years. We have been actively seeing students, youngsters, civil organizers, all of them are protesting against various policies and programs of this government. You have many things. The student agitations in JNU, and CAA protest, farmers protest, many of them. But this is something different because of the people who participated in it. The largest section of the people who participated and who organized and who actually, took the movement forward was the most unexpected lot of Indian society. The urban, educated, middle class, upper caste Hindu population. You won't get to see many of them in any other agitations or revolutions, or forget about revolutions, even in a street protest, or a very common, a small thing, even in our university, in our campuses, maybe, for example, a better hygiene in our campus, in maybe better facilities in our campus, or a subsidy in food prices in canteen, or or address the problems of reservation issues or admission related problems. You won't get to see this crowd in large numbers there. And these are the people come in hundreds of thousands, and they join the protest. That is something very extraordinary. You know, I have seen this crowd attending uh, in political protests. That was only when their core interests were actually challenged. You know, that was in my memory. It was in 1991 and 1992 when Mandal Commission report 93 sorry 93 Mandal Commission report was accepted by VP Singh government. That was in 1990. Sorry, before the Narasimha Rao government came in 2000, in 1991. That was the first time we see these people coming out and protesting in the street. And they were completely against reservation for Dalits, SC, ST, and OBC. OBC reservation was very small during in Mandal Commission report. It was mainly for the SC, ST reservation which happened in Mandal Commission, and of course some of the OBC sections as well. Oh, they were on the streets of Delhi, Bombay, and all these metro cities. There were a lot of self-immolation cases. One of the persons, I mean, a Goswami from Lucknow, he died in a suicide attempt. We saw the same kind of a protest by the same group in against an anti-reservation struggle. That was in 2006 and 7, when Arjun Singh, the former, former Union Minister, HRD Minister, Education Minister, introduced 27% of the OBC reservation in government jobs as well as government institutions. All of us, most of us are a beneficiary of that reservation policy, isn't it? Only after that 27% reservation in the higher education institutions, including AIMS, IITs, and central universities. That was the defining period where, hundreds of people joined central universities. Before that, that was in 2006, 2006 and 7. Yeah, the first Manmohan Singh government's second year. That must be in 2005 and 6. Before that, the population of this OBC population, the number of OBC students from Yadav communities, Muslim communities from Kerala, and all of them, is very abysmal in numbers, very small numbers, and most of them were actually from a very privileged background. They have their uncles working in central government in Delhi, or maybe in some sons of some diplomats or professors like that. The common OBC people started getting admissions in large numbers in these central universities, AIMS, IITs. All those things happened after that reservation. And the agitation against those reservation policies by the same, almost the same crowd, or the elder brothers. Delhi was literally in flames for many days. But the government was, not government, but Arjun Singh, we should be very much thankful to that great Congress leader. He was quite adamant. He did not back. That was the reason he introduced 27% of the reservation in these central institutions. We saw this kind of agitations, I'm not saying this kind of agitations, but the people who have agitated this time, we have seen the same class, same crowd in those agitations. And not very surprisingly, you won't get to see them in most of the other agitations. When JNU was literally burning, Kanaya Kumar, Sheila Rashid, Mar Khalid, all of them were in prisons. The whole, community. When Rohit Vemula was committed suicide in Hyderabad University, there was massive protest all across Indian campuses. You did not get to see most of them during that campaign. You know, we were all of us were, including me, all of us were in the campus. We were all at the forefront of those agitations at various campuses. You don't get to see these, educated second generation urban middle class Hindu upper caste participating in the, of course there are exceptions, of course there are exceptions, wonderful persons from this class, but not in numbers, like a crowd, like a crowd is always formed by obesity community, Muslims, Dalit community, students from Dalit communities, Muslims, and Yadavs, Meenas, many other castes. Of course, you have some of them, join those who strongly believe in social justice. CAA and NRC protest is a classical example. You don't get to see any of them actually sympathizing with the cause. Most of this class believe that, yeah, Muslims deserve a different treatment when it comes to citizenship. You don't get to see many of them joining the agitations. Farmers' protests happened. Of course, there are all of them, particularly in Delhi, all of them were against it because of the traffic blocks, crossing of the borders and all of things. They were completely agitated, annoyed, not because of the farmers who were in distress, rather because of the traffic, congestions and inconvenience they face on a daily lives. Commuting from Ghaziabad to Delhi or to Noida or to Gurgaon was quite terrible during those days. That was their problem, not because of the problems faced by the farmers. So this time, it was one of the core issues of why this happened in India, particularly this. I strongly believe, of course, I believe that this generation is different, not like us, not like millennials, not like the older ones. You are more committed, they're more committed to the values, principles, and all those things. They have a much more rational thinking, and they really wanted to go beyond the caste, class, equations of Indian society. I agree to all those points. But the trigger is mainly because of the reason of this problem. It was mainly because of this, the reasons, NEET examination question paper leaks and the subsequent irregularities in conducting the competitive examinations. Every middle class in the second, the metros and the urban centers of India, every family's life is revolving around one or two their daughters and sons who are preparing for some competitive examination at the national level, either UPSC or NEET or IIT or any similar kind of examinations. Their whole expectations, their hope, everything pinned on their son or daughter, one or two, maximum two children. Their life, their hope, their dreams, everything is built on their success. And they spend their money, effort. It's not only one person's engagement with an examination, the whole family is actually engaged with the examination. Your routine is changed according to the aspirant's life. So it's very important. You know that. I mean, you have friends from those such kind of families, So how much it is important for them to get their sons and daughters admitted to one of the prestigious institutions in India, either in, NEET or in IITs or NITs and all those things. That is the life altogether. The life is defined by that attempt. And it has been their privilege for a long time. The system was quite quite admissive. System was actually working for them. But now, for last 1 2 years since 2024, the very system they created, the very system that it was completely working for them since independence, even before the independence of this country, now started sabotaging them, cheating them. System is not delivering for them. That is their problem. Of course, they believe that this system is made for them. So any disruption or rupture in the system is not acceptable for them, be it reservation or be it anything which will reduce their chances to get into that same system. That is what happened. And it happened from a BJP government, which is supposed to be the holy custodian of their belief, their their state, their system, everything. And that betrayal was not acceptable. It was unbelievable. They did not expect Modi ji was doing this to them. And that was quite, and as I told you, the whole life of those families are actually pinned on these things. And that is being betrayed. There is no more, what do you say, more closer issues to the heart than these competitive examinations. Because let me repeat it, that defines their life. That is the reason you see this, this kind of a very, very strong formations and all those things. I'm not rejecting the idea of the rebellion. I'm not rejecting the commitment or the principles of this agitation. I'm talking about the participants who have joined this agitation in large numbers was essentially not because of the country is in danger, not because the institutions are crumbling. No, it's mainly because of the system is not working for them, and that system, they own that system. And that's not working for them. And that is a betrayal. That is not expected. And particularly from a BJP government. Right. Of course, I mean, thousands of them are actually deeply believed in a social welfare democratic structure. They're against the caste and class, hierarchies in the society. I agree all those points. And at the same time, this mass mobilization was essentially because of the reasons I just explained. And that's the reason, many analysts were saying why it was a failure of opposition that they failed to mobilize this crowd on the larger issues. That is something very fictitious. One of the comments I saw by a political analyst that Rahul Gandhi failed to mobilize this young generation on the issues of, petrol price hike and the ethanol, problems of the petrol. Come on, you don't get even 10% of this crowd on such an issue. That is not a concern. They know that once you became the part of the system by getting an admission to an IIT or AIMS or any government medical colleges, you get out of this income trap of these middle classes. You can take care of the high inflation problems. And social justice and the social equality and all those things never bothers them. I'm taking a prediction here. The next rallying point for such a mobilization for this crowd will be a massive anti-reservation movement. Of course, I'm not expecting this is happening from the leaders of this movement like Deep K, Saurav Das, and all of them. All of them are fine, very fine individuals. But some of the offshoots of this movement can easily mobilize people, although as big as this, but maybe a good number of people can be easily mobilized if they start with a massive agitation against every type of reservation. Yeah, Sahad has commented on that. Reservation Hatao movement it's well fit for this crowd. So there is no point of asking this question. The Indian opposition, political opposition, was failed to mobilize these people on the larger issues of vote chori. Or you won't get any of them actually coming and fighting for this cause, vote chori. That's not a concern. You won't get these people fighting for petrol price hike or inflation or maybe crony capitalism or economic failure of the government and those things. No, that is not the point. Social justice is not the cause. It is the cause or the core is they have been betrayed by the system which has been made, which has been served them for decades, if not centuries. So of course, I mean, at the same time, having said that, I still repeat, I am very hopeful of a section of those crowds and this generation that they will help uh, to democratize Indian society in a much deeper rooted way. And they will, of course, a section of them will help to form a politics which goes beyond the class and the caste divides. There are, of course, there are scope for it. But I'm really pessimistic when it comes to believe that this is a new dawn of, political movement, a complete transformation of Indian polity and populace. I'm yet to be ready to believe such kind of a proposition on what happened in last 1 month. But of course, I'm on this note. I mean that there are scope, hope, and excitement, of course, that people are the younger ones are actually getting more and more politically aware. You know, there's nothing called political apathy existing in India now. Everyone is involved with it. If you really use it in a very positive way, which is a very utopian dream, it can change the politics of India as well. But any such kind of transformation should be rooted in the idea of social justice. Anything without social justice in India, be it economic development, political transformations, or institutional building, anything which is not rooted in social justice is completely meaningless in India because of the divided, fragmented characteristics of our society based on class, caste, religion, and region. So social justice, that is the core principle of our constitution. The idea of Ambedkar, idea of Qaeda Millat. As long as, unless and until it is based on social justice, any such movements will be serving only a section of the society based on their immediate requirements from the existing system. So a complete overhauling or a revamping of system is not exactly the goal of such kind of movements. You have seen that, resigning a education minister will not change the system in India. Dharmendra Pradhan ousting Dharmendra Pradhan and inducting Prahlad Joshi will not make any difference in the system. What kind of a change it is going to bring into the education system of this government? Both of them are deeply rooted RSS people. Dharmendra Pradhan was one of the longest serving national convener for Bajrang Dal. We all remember his name because he was one of the terrifying name from the Bajrang Dal, youth Bajrang Dal back in 90s, particularly in Orissa. Prahlad Joshi is nothing better than Dharmendra Pradhan. So, as Kumarapilla sir in Sandeshan Cinema said, റാഡിക്കലായ ഒരു മാറ്റം അതുകൊണ്ടുണ്ടാവുമെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നതിൽ അർത്ഥമില്ല. There is nothing, but of course, it's not a radical change. but it gives a lot of hope, excitement, and something to look forward in our politics. Thank you very much. Okay, by this, let me stop. Maybe we can discuss. All right. Thank you. Sahab?
Yes, Saleel Khan, am I audible?
Yeah, of course. Yes, you are.
Okay. You have mentioned that the success of the recent CJP protest was the participation of those elite upper class Hindus in the forefront of the protest. My question is, does it actually signaling that any opposition protest or the social movements in India want to, it should be aligned with the major elite upper class Hindu interest to achieve the demands, to achieve the goals, like in any protest. What's your opinion?
Partially, it is true that you cannot get something successful in India unless until you incorporate the interest of urban Hindu elite, middle caste elite into that. Yeah, that is. I agree to that point. But the problem is that such kind of a revolution will not bring a transformation, a radical change. Aam Aadmi movement is one of the best examples of that, isn't it? We were so hopeful. All of us were quite enthusiastic, energetic, the kind of you know, things they have done in the initial years. It was almost romantic, it was almost like a dream. But what happened at the end is not something very nothing transformed after Aam Aadmi Party happened in Indian politics, isn't it? But look at it's not completely correct because see some of the social movements which turned into a political outcome. One is Bahujana Samajwadi Party movement, by Kanshi Ram, one of the most successful movement in Indian politics. Right. That is the movement which empowered politically in election politics, electioneering politics, electoral politics. Kanshiram was the person who actually empowered the people of Dalit communities, and they're successful. They're extremely successful in it. You know, successful in a way that the most castiest state in India has got a Dalit chief minister, a lady Dalit chief minister. So it was, of course, successful. Right, that was one of the movements which was successful. In a way, we can see that in the history of Muslim League as well, in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, in a different way. And some of the Aam Aadmi Party, as you told, they were quite sensitive and they were quite reluctant to address any of the exclusive issues of Muslims, Dalits, or any downtrodden, marginalized societies in the society. They were succeeded in the election politics. But that was only for 2 terms, isn't it? I mean, it couldn't bring any further changes on that, isn't it? Now they're almost dilapidated, crumbling down day by day. Yeah, that's the thing. So you can get your social movement or your movement successful by incorporating the Hindu interest or the middle class, upper caste, or middle caste interest. But that will not change. That will not transform the system the way you want it. You, in the sense, the way you and me, or the Muslims of this country, the backward castes, Dalits, or the downtrodden, marginalized communities wanted to change the system. That is not going to happen by such kind of incorporation by those classes.
Yes, that's what I'm asking. Like when we doing like conducting the CA and NRC like protest in across the country, do you think what will be the future of this kind of protest? Like this was only conducting by a minority section like Muslims or the Dalits or something.
We always dream of, in every protest, Muslims or any such any other groups conduct, they always ask for the larger support of the. It's not a. We always say this cliche statement. This is not an issue of Muslims. It's an issue of constitution. Now we say it. It's a problem of Indian society, not the Muslims' problem. It's a challenge to the secularism, constitutional values, and things like that. But have you ever seen that anyone largely endorsing the causes of the groups of the Muslim interest or maybe Dalit interest and all? Very unlikely. It happens exceptionally. What is the future? Future, you empower yourself. You become an inevitable force in the election process that they cannot move without you. Become invincible in the election arithmetic. As long as the country, continue as a democratic electoral democratic republic, you have a chance. So it's empowering yourself. Every community has a responsibility of political empowerment at this point of time. This is the junction. We have to do that and be an invincible force that, at least in some part of the country, maybe in a state or wherever it may be. But political empowerment is the answer. Whatever it takes, it's the only action. Nobody is going to, uh, you know, conduct the war and battle for you. You have to do it by yourself. Nobody else will come. So you have to show your strength electorally in democratic senses. Right? That is the only way out. And you cannot stop agitating. You cannot stop protesting. You cannot stop demanding for your rights and your privileges and your share of resources and wealth. For to do that, you have to be politically stronger. As a community, you have to move forward in that sense, in that direction. That's it. Any other questions or any observations or any critiques, comments, anything? If not, maybe we can stop.
Hello everyone. As we come to the end of today's session, I am very happy to propose a vote of thanks and sincerely thanks our respected speaker, Dr. Saleel Chembayil, for delivering such an insightful academic session on Gen Z movements in South Asia, protests, politics, and power shifts. And I also extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone who joined us today with us. And we expect your continued support in our upcoming programs. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
And I'm hopeful that we will meet again. Thank you very much.